Hello, Culture Matters podcast. Wow, am I excited for this episode. Before I introduce you to our guest, here is a quote just for this episode. Through faith, we let go of what could happen and create what is willed to happen. Inspired. The I in Guardian, roofing and siding. Our guest today is a man of faith, a leader, a friend, an employer of those seeking employment, a solver of problems as it relates to storm repair, because believe it or not, storms happen. People have things they need to fix, roofing, siding, relationships. Robert Frehafer helps all those with a smile and a handshake. I've got more that I want to add to this introduction. Robert's changed my life for the better, and I'm deeply convicted many others, and probably you listening to this, if you pay attention. He's been on the show many times. Take a look at all those episodes. They're all different conversations. He's not a robot. He's a man of thought. And he's back today to talk about inspired. Through faith, we let go of what could happen and create what is willed to happen. It's a value of the Guardian roofing and siding. Robert, what the heck does that mean?
Good morning, Jay. I'm also excited. I think I'm more excited after hearing your introduction. Thanks for having me on at this 6 o'clock hour in the AM, and it's great to see your level of excitement through this, and I appreciate it. You know, as we've gone through the Guardian values, the GUARD, and now we're up to the I and inspired. You know, at some point throughout this discussion, I take the time, because it naturally rises up, to say, you know, like, you have been impactful in the creation of the word, based off you, Jay, have been impactful in the creation of the written word of these values that represent what you experienced when you shadowed and you took time in the company and time with me to see what goes on. So as you're asking me, what does that mean? What I'm actually, as I read it and I know it and I understand it and I live it, I wonder how were you able to put the words down that then, when I go back to and review and dig into and give it conscious, prepared, intentional thought, I'm like, man, he really put these words together that are so deeply enrooted, entrenched into my faith, my beliefs, the actions that I live. So that's a question as inverse for you. I'm not asking it yet, but I'm just telling you that's a thought that comes through. I would like to answer your question, which is, what the heck does that mean? So in a very a simplistic way to say it, through faith, we let go of what could happen and create what is willed to happen. And I would like to break it down a little bit, but very simply, you know, I could equate this to, if I have a plan to go knock on doors for an hour, 1 hour, I'm going to go knock on doors. I'm going to, in a storm damaged affected area, I'm going to offer my services to help people out and educate them. Right? That's the G. You know, so that being said, as soon as I make that resolution with myself, you said I'm a man of thought. I have a thought. My thought is, well, it's before dinner. It's dinner time. Yeah, it's the afternoon. All these, I could say I have all this negative, right? Like, it's the daytime. People aren't going to be home. Maybe my stuff isn't ready. I literally could fill the rest of this podcast with thoughts that I would say would say, don't go do it right now, right? That's letting. So I will say, I've learned through working with you, that's a narrative. I'm creating a narrative based off of past experiences of what could happen. Those are real situations that could happen. It could not be the best. It could, things could go wrong. But also there's this new learned lesson that positive could happen, right? Like, oh, I could go out and I could knock on a person's door that owns 48 homes and whatever, who knows? Like, so I can think these things that are positive and kind of fill myself up with this positive self-talk. But both of those really are not rooted in faith. Faith is letting go of what could happen. To me, it's a thought, right? That the could happens, the coulds, the shoulds, the woulds, none of that is what's going to happen. So through faith, so the action of faith is, biblically, it's like the hope in things unseen, right? So I haven't seen what's going to happen when I go nuggets. I have history, I have things I could pull from, but so letting go of what could happen, which to me that's my thought, and inside it's my essence, my emotions, the things that drive me, and create what is willed to happen. So it's a very unique set of words that are put together there, because on face value, it's like, yeah, go out and knock the door, and then we see what happens, right? Like I create it by doing it, and when it says what is willed to happen, both of those words have a lot of weight for me, because when I think of create, I think of a creator, I think of God, and it's like, oh, I don't want to like say like it's my will exactly, but I do believe that in this world we have an opportunity to work together with God, work out his plans. We are actually, whether we choose to or not, I believe that he's sovereign and we're living out his sovereign plan. So rather than, unfaithfully navigating these things through faith, let it go, show up, and then the create is the action, right? Go do it. Like it's through the action that I'm creating, and then what's willed to happen. So is it my will? Is it God's will? Right? Like, so it's a unique thing to really break down, but it's quite simply, I let go of all the fear, the presupposition, the creative narrative that'll build me up, and just go and trust the process. Again, I actually took some notes before
Hmm.
today's meeting to touch on a few topics with this, because it could easily be esoteric and a little bit complicated. But it is very simply get yourself out of the way, trust the process. It from a work standpoint, from like Guardian, and a sales standpoint, and dealing with going out into the field. This I could break down every single action that we do and apply this value to it, because there is emotion, there is fear, there's positive, there's negative that go into this. So I just want to try that. Yeah, that's my simple, my simple breakdown of what it is.
How does it have, what relationship does inspired have with responsible, attitude, unique, the general theme of being a guardian, would you say, if at
So,
all?
so for me, I think that they all really intertwine with each other. Short of reading through each one, the G, right, for the name guardian, and who, what we are. If you're a staff, I look at it, if you're staff, originally I was thinking like, oh yeah, the sales reps, they're the guardians, they're out there. Well, we're all the guardian, right? Like and these values apply to all the staff in the company. But listening, communicating clearly, and telling the truth, right there, dealing with this inspired, like it's hard to tell the truth to somebody. It's not always comfortable. When I say hard, things that are hard for me generally are emotionally hard, right? That's what hard. Physical, these type of things, yeah, there's an element there, but when I say it's hard, that's like telling somebody something that they don't want to hear, telling a client, hey, you're not a good fit for us. That's hard, right? Because there's fear that's involved there. There's all these different things. So that would be like getting out of the way and creating what is willed to heaven by doing that action. The unique, um, you know, each client is different, right? So And we go back to the first value, and they're special, right? So we'll serve to their needs and create this win-win relationship. We've talked about that. That doesn't mean we're making business everywhere. We're listening, and sometimes serving to their needs would be referring them to another contractor, right? Or saying, we don't do that work. That's the win-win. And because, and it's a fearful thing. So to be able to step out and say that, or not knock at someone's door because that's not the home, that we don't do that type of roof, or whatever these things are that can tie into it with this value. Attitude, the A in attitude, communicate with our values, not selfish desires, and think long term. That's a big one, right? Like, because we talked about that a little bit with the D, but basically, that takes a lot to not think of your own selfish desires. Now, the beautiful thing is, if you go back to the value that we just talked about, we can look at it. It's not all or nothing. It's not only client or only me. It's to make a win-win. So it's not that we have to then spite ourselves to serve a client, because that would actually not be in the client's best interest long term, because we wouldn't be able to stay in business. We wouldn't be able to retain help. We would, so these things, as you look at them, they all intertwine. The R is, having the desire to help. This one really intertwines, right? Like this comes through a core value of this desire to help with responsible, a courage to move, and patience through the process. You talk about faith and you talk about courage and action. These things are intertwined, right? So the desire and faith, if you don't have the desire, what would your faith, if I don't have desire to help someone, well, my faith is going to be very, very weak. I will have no motivation to go out and knock that door. I'm just using that as a simple example, because I don't need to have faith. If the desire wasn't there to help, I wouldn't have to enact faith. I wouldn't have to rely on that. And then even the secondary part of that is the courage to move, so that's action, right? To do the move, to go out and knock the door and talk to them, and patience through the process, because especially in that one, it's known you're going to have to knock. It could be 30 doors and talk to 10 people before one person even gives you the time of day. And if you lose the patience after the first 5 doors, if you lose the patience after the first 5 people that you speak to, you'll miss that faithful interaction that you've created by continuing through it patiently, and then open up that, and you create what is willed to happen, which is that you go out there, you help people, you'll make relationships, you'll open doors, you'll open business, and you'll make an opportunity to help people. But without that patience through that process, and without going out there and being faithful. So again, then the D that's led up to it that we spoke about so far is supporting your teammates, upholding the processes, procedures, and the values of the guardian culture. That's all built around the hard actions. And that's really where we dug into, like, what if we don't do these things? What if we just do whatever we want, whenever we want, however we want? And we really unearthed that quickly. You'll tear apart the culture, you'll tear apart the company, and that's my view. That's what I've experienced and seen go on. And it's that hard work of, even when you say uphold the process, and support your teammates. So it sounds real nice, but what it actually means is that you have to confront someone. Like, I'm going to support you by letting you know you're not doing this. And I want to build you up. From a biblical context, it's reproof, right? Like, I want to build you up, and I want to continue to teach you and these cultures and these values. So it's not easy. All these things sound so nice, but again, I say not easy based off of emotion, how things impact me, and these challenges. Maybe for another, it's super easy. They just clearly say it. They're not emotionally attached to it, or they don't have these same fears or challenges that I do. And I want to be heard, right? The challenge comes from, I want to be heard. I want to be understood. And I also want my counterpart to be heard, cared for, and understood. And it takes a lot of work to do that with word when emotion is mixed in there, and prejudgments and past experience. Like, so that's the hard part for this. Similarly to knock on a door. I have my past experiences. I want to be heard, and I want my counterpart to be thought of, felt heard. And a lot of times when you do that, you don't get that. You just get, shut the door in your face. You're unwelcome. But ultimately, the payoff to open the relationship with the client, and then to open the relationship with 10 of their neighbors, because one of them tried you out, and the first 10 that said no for 3 weeks prior, they're all like, yeah, it's good to see you. And if we don't act out these values of having the patience through the process and listening intentionally and caring, well, we'll burn all those. I would say we would burn all the opportunities. We would burn those bridges, or literally we would burn down those doors that someone would never want to see a guardian again, because they were impatient, like yelled at them on the way out, right? Like, you're missing out on an opportunity. Don't be stupid. Like that's like the worst example I could think of lack of patience with a client that was unaware. They didn't know what they didn't know, and they just were sick of people coming to their door because they don't see it, right? If you turn it around to the inverse, the client would have to be faithful because they don't even see the damage that's on your roof. That is one of the biggest parts of the sale, is that you can't see this from the ground. So somebody that's already they're being pursued as a client. There's roofers or contractors in general are, it's hard to trust them. And then you go online and everything you see talks about how don't trust somebody that comes to your door to try to help you with storm damage or hail damage. And then they have to have faith, like, okay, let me be open-minded enough to listen to this person at the door, which is already coming into their personal space. So I'm using that example of at the door, but as we grow the businesses, as we navigate these things, it's not only at the door anymore. The door is in their hand, basically. It's their phone, it's technology, it's introducing ourselves to them through the medium of social media and things like that. So yeah, does that answer the question for you? And then some.
I wrote this down. Without rejection, how do we know what is true? If we know truth, if we are true. And then I thought rejection tests our character and our competence. How we submit to rejection sows the seeds of our culture or our nation. In this case, business.
What was the last thing? How we submit to objection?
Yeah, how we
Rejection.
submit to rejection. Here's an example,
It shows the culture. Was that the second part of that statement?
sows the seeds of our culture.
Sows the seeds.
So that, you're starting out in the business guardian, the first 6 months, you had a potential to become who you are today. The guardian of guardians, with the experience, with the know-how, with the trials, tribulations, to be as competent as you are. In the beginning, it was potential. In the beginning, it was, hey, I think I could do this job. Of course, there's going to be failure all along the way. It makes me think about the doubt portion to the faith portion. It's like we can all come to, if we think hard enough, we'll figure out all the ways that it'll fail before we start. But we're saying, wait, don't do that. Start. So that's implicit in any relationship of business from the start, that there's going to be things that are going to arise that we can't solve, that we're going to have to figure out. So our ability to submit to rejection I think it's like a filter. Meaning the filter is the 10 doors or the 100 doors or the 100 opportunities to serve clients. The person that's in business, that, or the salesperson that stays, they're being filtered by the culture to see if they have what it takes, the character, the competence. Those are some thoughts that come from your, awesome unpacking. And then I wrote the inverse of this is in doubt, we hold on to what could happen and undermine what is possible. Like the opposite of the through faith, we let go of what could happen and create what is willed to happen. Like think about, that green bean salesperson. In doubt, we hold on to what could happen. It's all like all the things that could happen and undermine what is possible. Maybe we never start.
I have so many thoughts with what you're saying here. A couple things. One, when we're talking about this doubt, that really rose up when you were talking about the doubt and society, and that it's not a blind, that going back to beginning, right? Like when you started talking about the beginning of the company and doubt rising up, the doubt is actually part of the superpower, because when you think of all the problems, you think of all these things, if you're solution minded, I'm solution minded to a fault in some scenarios, and I could talk about that later, but that solution minded, well, then you're thinking of all the things that could go wrong, and if you solve those problems before they even occur, you then create an awesome flyer to deliver on a very basic. You then create, I need signs, I need this thing, because the people are going to, next thing they're going to do, well, then they're going to want to see my website, and then what? Well, they're going to want to see my Better Business Bureau, and then what? So then you use that doubt actually. So there's a paradox there, right? Like, because if we say, especially on, and I'm not saying like, oh, I've arrived, but I have a significant amount of experience here. So if I look at it from this perspective right now and say, well, just don't have doubt and just act faithfully. Well, what are you acting faithfully in? And that's where the leader and those that have come before you, can demonstrate. So they would be having faith in the word, the written word that's on the wall that we speak of, the spoken word, and then the actions that preceded those values through me, through the other guardians, that it's proven, right? So now, just like any culture, I just, not to say any, I'll pull from Christianity, right? Like those that have gone before me, I see there's an attraction to it, right? There's a promise to it that they've lived out, they've lived virtuously, they lived authentically, they were obedient to God. It was delivered from the word, right? So, and then it was acted out, it was delivered, and then there's this something to have faith in. So I say that because the whole concept of doubt being eradicated is not the end of it, right? Like, so that's where I say, like, it's going to be, and you use this terminology, that the internal conflict, the greater the internal conflict, the higher probability for significant more creation. So potentially, and that goes into some other theoretical things that you talk about, like the liar lid and all these different things, like potentially the more hurt or the more vision that a employee can have of an employer, the closer they get. And if that employer is unauthentic and then revealed as a liar, the employee will break off, and then that would be the thing that would catalyst for them to solve more problems better. So I say all
Yeah, and
that.
just to clarify, they may even not even be a liar. They just may not be embracing all truth, and both parties build resentment because of omission and lack of communication clarity that separates the two
I don't know
parties.
anything about that at all.
Well, we all go through
I
it in
understand that. I
lives,
understand.
yeah,
I understand.
and in business context. So, but what did you? Okay, so
So
let me
the
make sure I
point that I
get this
was
straight.
digging in on was that the
Yeah,
doubt actually is not something to be eradicated. It's something to embrace in a healthy way to then solve
that's a
problems
good point.
and communicate through. But now that guardian in this medium, Now that guardian has established a set of principles, values, and actions that can be acted out, and they have proven results. Now that's always changing. But all that being said, now the person you say that the guardian that's coming in, they have leadership to follow. They have examples before them that they can then make that choice. Do they fall
All
into
right, how about this?
yes,
The eradication of doubt has a tie to unthinking, unknowing, and a fear towards action. It's like if I'm doubting something, I'm thinking, like, because when you use that example, doubt is an opportunity to solve problems. It's like doubt, oh, I don't know if this is going to work. Well, how could I do it this way or do it that way? Doubt comes before thinking. And it makes me think like, here's an example. We don't want our employees to stop doubting, because then they may not ask the questions necessary to improve the company.
that's right.
And so we're all going to, if we're thinking, if we're open creatures, if we're open people, if we're courageous, if we're capable of thought, doubt is going to play a role.
That's I'm in alignment. What I'm thinking about right now is that, one would conceptualize potentially that, oh, if a new employee would just come in, do everything that we said with no questioning of anything, they would have the highest probability of success. But the challenge is that they would be living, if we didn't talk about the hard part, right? Yes, someone is going to slam the door in your face. Someone is going to yell at you. Somebody is going to look you straight in the eye and say, I already had it checked out by my brother, and he's a roofer and he knows. And you're going to know, you're going to have this knowledge inside of you that just because you're a roofer, you don't know how, it doesn't mean you know how to inspect for hail damage. These people don't understand what's going on. Just because 5 contractors came ahead of you and left, and they were mean, or they were, left a bad impression, doesn't mean that you can't win that client over. So if the sales rep, if the guardian would come in and only have this like ultra, clear view, like everything's going to be awesome. I just knock 50 doors and I get a client and then we work through things. It's not held in reality, right? Like, so then they would be blindsided potentially with all this negative stuff that hits them. So it's the action of talking about this is because it really is. And and what I found so far, whether it's only the people that I've attracted to the company or it's human nature, this is a hard job. Sales in general is hard. Add another thing in here where we do a bunch of work before even we have some level of a contract or agreement or obligation from the homeowner to utilize us, where it takes so much work to get one person or one family to a point where, yeah, we got them the resources to get all the work done. And then when that, family decides to keep the money for themselves, not do the repairs, reveal that their family, somebody else is a roofer and they're going to do the job, or go with another contractor that might say, yeah, we'll pay your deductible, or we'll throw this, or whatever the thing is, that we don't retain the job. It hurts your feelings, especially because the way the relationship is built, all the work is done, all the expectations that have been set. So my point with that is that this is a hard job and it is uncomfortable, and there's a lot of emotional things that go along with it. So as a leader, I look at it like, all right, I'm tending to numbers, right? Okay, we have numbers. Then I'm tending to actions and character to get people out there to do what they need to do. And then also tending to the emotions, right? And whether that's too high or too low, trying to help navigate, as well as lead through my own personal experience of balance and how I've lost balance in my life, and the real tangible consequences of losing balance, and how for me, how to balance, like, okay, the sustainability of the company, the desire to create profit, the desire to help grow and help other people, yet individually listening to my counterpart, which are the staff of the company, and then helping them create a balanced life that is living up to their goals, their desires, they're all different. They're not all the same. And then bringing all of that together, it is a unique opportunity that I'm in with the experiences that I've had. But I really enjoy it.
I have so the hard job can lead to detachment. Example, how many times are we told not to listen to the person that slammed the door in our face? Not to be present with the objection that didn't go our way. I want to make now, there's fruit on the other side of if we continue to act despite our emotion, despite our values being tested by conflict. There's value, meaning you keep working, okay, the hard job. But here's a thought I want your feedback on, and really for the audience to think about. So the hard job can lead to detachment, which is a form of an attachment, or the inversion of attachment that has consequence to the people's lives, to the personal lives of those burdening the hard things, which will simultaneously make them who they are or appear to be in culture, made in their own image. What a hell. Like, so that's how I look at the state of business without intervention. The state of business without intervention. The hard job, that percentage of salesperson, that percentage of business owner, that percentage of a person that can do the hard job, they'll figure out ways to compartmentalize, to detach, to do the hard job. And before they know it, they're made in who are they? What are they now? They're what culture says they are. The successful, the ideal, the projection of the idealized self, of all the people that failed and didn't continue acting, that now idolize or worship them. I think there's some level of cost to that. It separates us from meaning. Like you've helped me with this, like the eternal. So here's something practical that I think you've shared with Inspired is every door, every call. I don't need to rewrite the narrative. Oh, they're this, they're that, they're a hater, they don't matter, what they said is a lie, or whatever worldly training is conditioning me to be separate from my neighbor, separate from the human being that I've just imposed myself and my self-image that may or may not have a want or a need for my wares. It's like, be careful what I say, what I think, and how I relate to those that are uninterested in relating to me, because rejection and how I navigate rejection will sow the seeds of my culture. Like, and I'm prone to lying to myself, right? Creating stories like, buyers are liars and all this stuff. Well, okay, let's say they are. Who isn't? So Kierkegaard, once you label me, you negate me. So what's the utility in that? I'm separating myself from myself through this projection of myself, which is my title, my commission, my business, what have you. What are the consequences? I think the consequences are clear. I'll be less present at home. I'll be less aware of what matters. I'll want to work less. I want to do less. I want to make less calls. I want to make less door knocks. I want to make, and basically it's like now it's catching a falling knife. The leaders are not doing the things that will inspire the future leaders. Right? They're not getting training because they can't see them living the values. They can't see them representing the values in action, demonstrating how to be the solution to the customer's problem. So yeah, I think hard jobs create hardened people unintentionally. And if we're too hard, we become closed off from the very relationships necessary to grow the business, to grow the people. I think these episodes are very helpful for our audience to see someone that's integrating who they are as a person, their actual like personal beliefs through the business in a way that's meaningful and helps people be people.
I appreciate you taking some time and going through this, and even as we talk about the one small, part of the job is going and knocking on the door. We talk about through faith we let go of, right? Like, and that is again, it can be viewed, that whole value can be viewed as somewhat esoteric, but really it does come down to it's applicable in the action. And one area where, when you think of faith, when I think of faith, it's something that can grow, and it grows by trial, practice, the end result, what is realized through it, and then it will, based off of that, it will create more actions of faith, and more faith growth will you might knock on a business's door, or you might knock on a whole strip mall, and then you might knock on a your growth will your actions can grow based off of the benefit revealed through faith, through the action. But I don't want to, I want to land on something here. I want to make sure that I share this point, which is, one, when you consider faith, it's a held belief inside, right, of you that's growing. But as it's growing, this faith coupled with what is believed and experienced as truth. So in the medium of roofing, right? Like you said in the last meeting, what's this all got to do with roofing? So in the medium of roofing and faith and knowledge, if we know, if the guardian that's going out into the neighborhood, they know, like, there was damage in this, there was hail here, it's damaging, I could see the signs of it. The more that they are faithfully equipped with knowledge, so they know the truth, right? If they know it, if they've been on 4 roofs in the neighborhood, whatever it is that grows that knowledge, it could just be training, trust in a leader, whatever this is, they have the truth. So the holder of truth is the guardian in this scenario. They're going out to the door with we'll call it a flyer, but it's basically a light of truth to educate the owner, the homeowner there, the client, the potential client. If the client says, I already had my roof inspected, I don't have a problem, I don't want your help, I don't need your help, I'm okay, I'm not going to do these things, it is significantly less going to impact the guardian emotionally, because they're resolved in their truth of, yeah, I have this information, I have this good and I'm here to help. And if they can hold on to that truth, I'm here to help. And if they can hold on to the truth that I have what's in the best interest because my company that I represent is going to be honorable, listen, create win-win relationships, act in faith, if they believe the values, they will be able to stand at the door. They'll be able to get spit at, punched in the face. I'm being extreme, but let me not, pontificate on. They'll be able to get the door shut in their face. They'll be able to get somebody to say, dude, 17 people have been here already. They'll be able to just hear, I don't have damage. And they'll say, hey, thanks so much. Can I give you a flyer just in case you change your mind or you see us doing any other work? I'd love to have the opportunity, maybe at a better time, to speak with you. So not to say that they're closed-minded to it, but I think the relation between the confidence and truth and faithfulness of the guardian going to the door will be able to love their neighbor. They'll be able to not be, like you said, buyers are liars. So what? Some will, some won't. So what?
Because
Next.
what
Just
if
not listen and move on. Let me just finish this last statement and I will.
goes,
So the point is that they can love their neighbor, love their counterpart through getting this, and there will be a higher probability that that person would actually look at the flyer potentially than if they were like, whatever, dude, take this flyer and threw it at them, or will you at least take this? Do you? And we this language is used. I understand. This is what I use. I understand. You weren't expecting me. There's a lot of stuff going on. Please, if we never see each other again, just take a few minutes and read this flyer so you have some level. I feel obligated that I want them to see it because I've realized that this information may not break through. They may not get it. And I look at it at the same concept of a Christian faith, right? Like from a Christian faith, the biblical worldview is that humans that are in the world that are not spiritually adopted into the family of God through faith in Christ, that their ears are shut, their eyes are blind, they're spiritually blind, and they cannot even hear or see the truth. It is a miracle of God that these scales fall off of their eyes, their ears are open, that they can hear the truth of who they are to God and have this salvation. And it's not one that you go out and share the truth by, beating somebody over the head or forcing them into it. It's like this spiritual interaction. So when you bring that back even to the value of this through faith, we let go of, what could happen and we create what is willed to happen. We're just like the actors here for a more, we play a role in the part of a more bigger picture that's going on that we might not even always see what it is or what is intended, but we faithfully navigate through it from a Christian standpoint as well as from a work standpoint. And to me they are intertwined, right? The way that these biblical principles are not okay, only live this when you go to church. It's taught as a discipleship, it's discipline. These are disciplines that are lived out in life and they apply at work. I don't know the numbers, but preachers talk about it all the time. Like, Jesus talked like this high amount of times he talked about money, talked about hell, and money is tied in with work, right? And human and what we do. So these principles and these disciplines they translate throughout all these areas. So thank you for allowing me to share that.
well, let's look at back in the day before money was a currency. There were things that were traded for action,
or even actions for action.
So there's something of trade. What does that trade actually represent? It represents something immaterial, a connection between parties. So how we work reveals our capacity to trust, our capacity to be. I wrote a couple things down, came to mind when you were elaborating. it was the question when I've asked myself, and I'll ask the audience, you. So the story, well, first to say the story we tell ourselves brings us closer or farther away from our neighbor. Exempling the neighbor as in those outside of the medium, those outside of the business at hand. So how we relate to that person at the door. What if the story we tell ourselves, what if how we relate to them has an impact on how we show up with our family, our friends, our enemies, strangers? What if there's a relationship? What is the cost to ourselves? That's a question I ask. What could be? And then the less thought going into action, let's say building the business. What if it's vice will be proportional to vision and work? I'm in a heightened state of anxiety because of how many lies I've been unable to burden. How like the lack of depth in dialogue. My body is absorbing this. I'm going to have to cope with this anxiety in some way because I'm doing hard work. I'm having hard conversations. I'm being beaten daily. It's all conflict. It's all, this is what I think. This is what you think. This is what I want you to think. You want me to think what you think. Right? I don't want what you have to sell, or I don't want, this is what I think. This is what you think. This is what I want you to think. This is what you want me to think. It's a battle. We may or may not be able to be actually serve the person based on what they want and need, which they may or may not even be aware of what they want and need at varying degrees of thoughtfulness. So I also wrote down, our values are revealed in the antagonism of those in contrast of our projected values. And I say projected values because our values are revealed in the antagonism of those in contrast with our projected out. They're projected until they're acted out and interacted through. So, yeah, the compartmentalization of Sunday. Well, that Sunday is very necessary, whatever the day is, where one gathers with those accountability partners to be reminded of what the how to behave. That's a necessary component, like a cleansing and a cleansing of the palate. But everything that happens outside of that training center is where the values are revealed, the capacity of one's values are revealed. And I could spend the rest of my life saying everybody else is garbage, or I could be proportionally loving to the degree by which I perceive them to be garbage. Like, so the more garbage I'm perceiving someone to be, the more I have to act out my perceived or projected values. So they're actually occurring in this realm, the world. Or else I'm missing the opportunity for what can happen. I think there's a connection with vice and vision and the avoidance of the conflicts that matter most in the business cells, which are the ones that aren't going well, where the buyer doesn't want to buy, may not need to buy. Like, I'm tested. I have to get to know them, figure out what's going on, maintain humility and service while they potentially spit at me and challenge my pride, which is coming from the past based on everything that I have done and be, like who I am. Like when I'm making hot calls, I don't introduce myself as I try to keep it like I'm just Jay. Like I'm not like, because as you become more successful, your last name has more merit. Or if I'm the owner of the company, I'm going to be tested less than if I'm the low rung employee. So if I'm calling a group, like I'm just Jay, I'm going to be tested more because I'm not borrowing the bias that comes with if somehow someone's connected to the Doran, the culture man piece. That's less of a challenge of the values. So those are some things that pop up. It's like vice. I think there's a connection with this, the wantingness, or not even wanting, the desiring, which is like, let's say, an impulse. It has a connection with angst. And anxiety has a connection with how I have conflict. And how I have conflict with my enemies will reveal my value system. And my value system, my ability to act out my value system will come from repetition and war and battle. And that has a relationship with the truth. Like telling it, speaking it, being able to burden someone else's. Because if I tell you what I think, you're a customer or potential customer, like I really tell you what I think. I mean, the farther away we are in a relationship, meaning there's no past interaction together, I'm just an anomalous representation of how you behave in the world. Like people that drive cars and beep at everybody. They're just a car. They're not a person. So if I tell the truth, I'm going to get smacked in the face at a higher degree than if I tell the truth to somebody that I already have a relationship with. They might say nothing and just like repress it. I don't like how you said that. It's painful. And I think there's a relationship between the stranger and the people closest to us. Our capacity to relate to them. What I think this has all to do with business is, dang, like think about these stories that I just reread, like the Wolf of Wall Street. These people running around, making calls, making business happen, but it was fueled by vice. It was fueled by, I mean, is it really real? Whatever you call your company, whatever I call my company, whatever I say, oh, I'm an advisor. What's real about that? You strip it all away, you just have people that act in ways that, would you really want to hang out with? Can you really trust to have a relationship with somebody that's doing the drugs and doing the and taking your wife and taking your sister and all the if you break it all down, this is not sustainable. There's a cost. Someone is paying for this. So of course that these people, I want to be clear, like with the podcast, that people listening, you can be a heck really successful if you stop listening to this episode and just go to work. Maybe listening to this episode is not helping you actually get what you want, which is power. Right? And capital can get you power, can get you what you want. So like this show ain't helping you. Go to work.
I'm going to interrupt you for the listener that's out there right now, because
Stop listening.
You would potentially be sending them off to a long and hellish road into purgatory by saying this, right? Because you have more information than that.
Well, this is what I mean, is to be successful, as to make money, to make profit, to get people excited about what you're doing. If you know what your business is about, you know what you want, and you're able to detach enough to just get to work and work 15 hours a day for many years. Anyone listening to this, the less thinking one's doing, the more working, you're gonna win, because you're competing against people that frankly aren't working, they're unsure. You're just gonna win. The question becomes, at what cost? So when it comes to building a business of culture, the long term, it's like the tortoise and the hare. The tortoise is virtue and the hare is vice. And in the absence of the ability to respond to conflict, vice is inevitable. Where Robert has helped me and just a great steward of there's another level to it. It's like the top floor. Well, like, what about, when you're dead? Like, so from a business standpoint, virtue, I think, is going to get more long-term shareholder value. Vice is going to make a lot of money and have like crazy volatility. Slow and steady wins race. But then where you come in, you're like, by the way, what about forever? Oh, didn't think about that. That's a fair point. I wrote this on Threads yesterday. I'm like, God is our accountability partner. Without retribution, accountability is meaningless. Who said that? Scott Einbinder said that the other night on the podcast. Without retribution, accountability is meaningless. Wow, what a freaking
What is
great
retribution?
Like consequences.
Okay.
So God is our accountability partner. You got away with all that stuff, but you're gonna pay. That's a pretty damn helpful tool. Like, yeah, no one knows, but you're screwed. Like, it forces the person to really look at the life and say, who am I? What am I capable of? So, I mean, you've represented this in your life to such a degree that, it's really influenced me and others I'm close to. So, testament to your testimony. But I'm looking for this from a business standpoint. Somebody listening to this, if they are selfish and they work longer and with detail, they are going to make a lot of money. They may even have people that want what they have that are willing to do whatever it takes to get it too. The question is, at what cost and how long can they sustain that? And I think that's what we're talking about today, and what this series of value conversations is really about. Long-term shareholder value. And when you say long-term, Robert, you're always talking about like, yeah, even if it's not explicit, it's like time and space. Oh yeah, what about outside of that? Long-term shareholder value is like, there's long-term shareholder value like for 50-year business plan, and then there's like infinite.
Yeah.
Can you bring this home? Because I gotta go.
How many minutes do I have?
2.
So I don't want to leave the listener in this mindset that because even though you asked the question, but at what cost? So if the listener is here and you're like, yeah, discipline, 15 hours a day, be intentional, do your business, do your work. But then you bring up the end question, but at what cost? What vice will come in? How will that look? I think that you and I both have some experience to pull from, whether it's based off of our own personal or those that we interact with. You have a significantly wide net of dealing with and talking to people that have put their head down, were focused, worked 15 hours a day, created wealth, and attracted those that wanted those things, and that you could shed light before somebody just somehow thinks like, I'm willing to pay the cost that is unknown. And truly, if we listen back, if we could rewind the tape in only short, maybe 5-10 minutes prior, you were explaining how the less we listen, the less we have the conflict, the more that we just push through. Don't listen to things. You talked about it in the Wolf of Wall Street. They didn't have the conflicts. They just pushed through. They just worked those days. They just picked up the phone and made the calls. Now that's an extreme version of vice intertwined with the action. And I do believe there is a middle ground, right? That where someone can be disciplined, work, have a plan, go out and do these things, but that would be built around the leadership. It's going to be built around their virtuous mindset. And what I hear you say, and what I've experienced, and is that there is this, from a psychological standpoint, I think the language is cognitive dissonance, where your brain is not really attached to reality. So we'll create these narratives to resolve whatever is going on. So if there's issues, there's things, and we'll just continue to put our head down and work. And that's where I was like, oh, that's like living hell. That's purgatory. That is like, it has a high probability of landing somebody 10 years down, 15 years down the line, not having, and it goes back to the same things that you said. Well, you believe that there's a direct correlation theoretically and through experience and your observation, that people that avoid the conflicts, don't do the things that they need to do, handle the virtue, it impacts their outside of the work life with their wives, their children, their balance, these things. So again, it's not like it's a 3-step plan, like do 1, figure this out, 2, act this way in this scenario, and 3, you get all the reward. It is an individualized, communicating with those around you, listening, and then acting through your values in the business, partnered with 15 hours a day of disciplined work and doing these things that will land into, or have the highest probability of, what you talked about, which is hard times, conflict, always navigating these things, which will then create, which is my experience, and we may be wired differently. I will say that. And I say we as in you and I, or leaders, entrepreneurs, there may be some common thread that goes through the way that I say wired, the way we view, think, perceive, communicate, and act in this world. We may be different based off of how we are, how we're made, and that may be our role, and that is okay. But it can create a lot of conflict and change that goes on. But I was just telling my son, like yesterday or the day before, like, as we were conflicting, we were having a conflict, and I said, like, hey, like, life is hard. But you can fall in line and you can do what everyone says, or you can think and you can question everyone, and you can then try to understand what they're thinking and where do they get their information from and why do they get it. And do you want to subscribe to what they're saying and believe these things, or do you want to look at it? Because that is what creates change. When you think of things like, every evolution that we have, I believe it's like evolution of technology or things and stuff. It's like problems being solved and differences and swaying, even religious, like from Catholic to Protestant. And it's a protest, right? Like it's a change. No, look at this. I'm seeing this book differently. So I was explaining to him, like, not everybody's going to do that. And it probably is. I don't know it that much because I'm not built that way, but it probably may be softer and easier to not have these conflicts. So I circle all that back to share that with the listener, to say, yes, you may receive the gifts of this world of money, power, but even when I listen to you and I view, well, that's what you talked about. Well, yeah, you get this power, but it's like you rise to the top in it's lonely at the top, right? You don't have you have it. And you talked about how people that see what the person at the top has, you may even attract people that want what you have. So they're willing to do and create this, further separation of people that are idolizing what it is that you've actualized, and they want it for themselves. And where does that come from? And then ideally, not ideally, but conceptually, you and I will think this way because that's how we're wired. We psychologically evaluate the things. We make these presuppositions, which are, and ultimately, is that due to our own, I will not even go into that because that's 2 minutes you said, and it's definitely been longer than that. So that is a cautionary tale for the one. Now, for those that, I don't know it, but for those that are healthy, emotionally, spiritually, mentally, they're educated, they're sound, they have good advisors, they have, open conflicts and conduct around them. Like, yeah, I really believe that there is value in working 15 hours a day, and there is meaning found through the action of vocation, through work, life can be enacted out, and your values can be enacted out, and it will make you want to go to work, and it will make you want to value that. That's what I found will make you want to value the time with your family, with the other things you do. And then I have been able to look at it and say, okay, now I have to make a choice. Like, how much time do I want to work? What is the value of the things? What is the reason for working? Is it to impact others? Is it for my own selfish things? So thanks for talking about these things. This is a high level meta view potentially of the value of inspired through the medium of the leadership, of ownership, and even all the way to what you talked about, eternal, like looking at something from an eternal standpoint. So significantly longer today than normal. I see you must have had time. Thanks for allowing me. You said 2 minutes, and I could see by my little timer here, I'm up at 7, so it's only a significant amount.
Here's a thought that comes from your breakdown. People that believe in God, let's say leadership, ownership, not people, which for the business context, ownership that believes in God are less separate from their people. And by believe, it is meant having godly virtues in real time.
I like that second half added, because you and I both know that I believed in God. I believed, but without having godly virtues. Say that second half again in real time.
Yeah, it is. And by believe, it is meant living out godly virtues in real time.
Living out, exampling, practicing.
Well, hold on, this is important. That will lead to power. It goes back to, I don't believe someone actually has to act out the values of God, their belief, to get the fruit of, like, the eternal. Because I don't think that's part of that. I think this is a good cliffhanger for everyone. But if you want to be successful in business for the long term, acting out godly values is going to get you there. If you want to go to heaven, that's probably a very personal. You could probably, I would, but the both is probably even better. So that's where I'm at.